It was a quiet afternoon in Nashville when Carl Dean, the famously private husband of Dolly Parton, stepped before the microphone for the first time in over 5 decades. His voice steady, his gaze earnest, prepared to share the story behind the silence. For years, fans have speculated about the man who married one of the world's most dazzling icons and then vanished from view, trusting spotlight and stardom to swirl around him while he remained a steadfast figure in the wings. Now, at age 78, with Dolly celebrating her 50th wedding anniversary, Carl agreed to break his vow of public reticence and speak out. And what he revealed reframes not only their legendary partnership, but also our understanding of the sacrifices and quiet strength behind one of entertainment's most enduring marriages. Began by acknowledging the mystery. He smiled wryly and said, "I've been called a million things. Her manager, her agent, her chauffeur. But never once before have I addressed those names born of rumor. I always believed a man should keep his promises, and I promised Dolly long ago that our marriage was ours, not the world's." His tone was gentle but resolute, as if placing each word deliberately on the table to dismantle decades of gossip. When pressed why he chose now to speak, Carl pointed to Dolly's recent memoir and her own willingness to be vulnerable. "When your bride tells the world her deepest secrets," he said, "you realize that trust is a two-way street." He then painted a picture of their courtship in 1964, Dolly 18 and brimming with dreams, spinning tunes in cafe lounges, Carl 22, a delivery driver with a trade school education, drawn not to her fame but to her spirit. He recounted their first meeting at the Hermitage Hotel, where he spotted a young Dolly backstage after a small regional show. "She was radiant," he recalled, "but she didn't walk like she was on a stage. She moved as if the world was hers to welcome, not to conquer." Their courtship, he explained, thrived on casual dates, hamburger stands, church potlucks, and nights at the drive-in. There were no cameras, no record contracts, just two people discovering common ground in laughter and faith. The moment the topic shifted to their wedding day, Carl's voice softened further. He described arriving at the tiny downtown chapel in his 1957 Chevy, nervous as a calf on ice. Dolly, wearing a simple gown adorned with wildflowers, approached his car with a grin that Carl said still makes his heart flip. "I remember thinking, I'm the luckiest man alive," he admitted. Their vows, shared in front of just a handful of family and friends, were whispered promises, love without pretense, partnership over showmanship, and an unbreakable alliance against the storms fame would inevitably bring. Despite Molly's explosive rise, chart-topping hits, sold-out concerts, films, theme parks, Carl maintained his distance from the public eye, choosing instead to run their Doraville gas station, tinker in the garage, and raise their 3 dogs. When Dolly became a household name, she often joked that Carl's invisibility was her best cover. Now, Carl revealed the true reasons. He believed his greatest calling was to anchor her life rather than amplify her career. She needed someone who wouldn't see dollar signs or publicity opportunities, he said. "I saw a woman who worked harder than anyone I've ever known, and I wanted to give her peace." He paused when asked about the most challenging season of their marriage. Without hesitation, Carl spoke of the tornado that tore through Sevier County in 2016, destroying parts of their Tennessee property. "I watched her cry over trees," he said quietly. "I also watched her rally neighbors, open her home to displaced families, sing hymns by candlelight when the electricity went out. I thought then, she's my compass, my courage." In that disaster, he saw both her vulnerability and her leadership. And while Dolly recounts the experience with her trademark optimism, Carl's account highlighted the raw grief and relentless determination that undergirded her response. When the conversation turned to their personal routines, Carl offered a rare glimpse of their daily life. He described mornings spent over coffee on the front porch, the two of them reading newspapers and sorting mail. Afternoons often found Carl working on vintage car restorations while Dolly wrote lyrics in her sunlit studio. Evenings were reserved for quiet dinners, with Dolly occasionally strumming a guitar as Carl hummed along. "We've got rhythms neither of us could have scripted," he said, chuckling. "And those rhythms kept us, not the stage, at the center of our world." Finally, Carl addressed the loneliest misconception, that he resented Dolly's fame or struggled with his own identity in her shadow. "I never felt overshadowed," he said firmly. "I felt illuminated by her light. Our marriage didn't require me to be famous, It required me to be faithful. That simple declaration, faithful over famous, resonated like a benediction, appending decades of tabloid speculation. As he concluded, Carl traced a line back to that first promise: privacy for publicity, peace for performance, love for legacy. And in that vow spoken aloud for the first time, he redefined what it means to stand beside greatness without ever demanding the stage. After that Sunday afternoon in Nashville, Carl's phone kept vibrating with messages from fans, journalists, and charities he and Dolly had quietly supported for years. For someone who always valued privacy, the sudden attention felt intrusive. Yet as he read point after point, thanking him for steadfast support, sharing that his quiet courage had inspired their own marriages, he realized his silence had spoken volumes. Instead of courting further limelight, he redirected his energy into charitable initiatives he and Dolly championed, embodying the shared belief that love is sustained by action, not headlines and faith. In the past, Carl had overseen the Imagination Library's community launch in Sevier County, though few realized the depth of his involvement. Late nights found him poring over spreadsheets, ensuring budgets balanced and libraries stocked. He negotiated discounted printing costs, arranged volunteer trainings, and personally typed thousands of envelopes. When the program launched, he sat in the back row, listening as young families cheered for the first free book in their child's hands. That image stayed with him, a simple wooden table bearing tiny fingerprints. "I didn't need applause," he said. "Their laughter was enough." He still feels the joy they sparked. Behind the scenes, Carl's practical advice shaped Dollywood's expansion strategy. While Dolly dreamed in Technicolor themes and musical extravaganzas, Carl thought in terms of parking capacities and local hiring initiatives. He suggested family-oriented rides to appeal to multi-generational visitors, then watched as Dolly's team brought those ideas to life. Though he claimed he never issued memos stamped Carl's recommendations, countless projects bore his fingerprints: toddler safe play areas, artisan marketplaces, and dedicated rest zones for staff. In every blueprint, his steady hand left an unseen imprint. On tour, Carl became Dolly's unsung guardian. He flew in on private charters after her final encore, carrying a thermos of her favorite tea and a timetable of the quietest backstage lounges. Once, he reorganized her medication schedule mid-flight, calculating dose times against crossing time zones to prevent exhaustion. When Dolly confessed that bright lights sometimes disoriented her, Carl slipped her hand and whispered, "You shine so others can see. Let me guide you when you stumble." Though cameras never captured these moments, they formed the bedrock of their partnership, the silent choreography that enabled Dolly to perform night after night at full strength. Throughout his life in Dolly's orbit, Carl resisted the lure of public controversies. He never joined social media platforms, refrained from endorsing political causes, and declined every offer that risked shifting attention away from Dolly's message. When tabloids linked her name to passing trends, his only statement remained, "My wife's work speaks for itself." That refusal to feed gossip reaffirmed the vow he made at their wedding: protect love from the noise of the world. In a landscape where every opinion becomes clickbait, Carl's neutrality stood as both a shield for Dolly's brand and a testament to his own integrity. Last month, on their 50th anniversary, the Deans celebrated in privacy. No televised gala, just a candlelit dinner under string lights in their Tennessee garden. Dolly wore the simple silk dress from their first date. Carl donned the tweed jacket he wore on their wedding day. Their 3 dogs curled at their feet as he proposed a toast to 50 years of laughter, hardship, and harmony. Dolly's eyes glistened as she returned the vow of gratitude, thanking him for being the quiet echo of her boldest melodies. Not a single camera rolled. They had each other, and for Carl, that was the greatest spotlight of all. As he stepped back from the microphone that day, Carl Dean offered one final thought: "In every chapter Dolly and I write together, I'll be the one behind the page, not in front of the camera." And that is exactly how we chose it. His words, simple yet profound, outlined a lifetime of mutual respect, her brilliance, his steadfastness. It wasn't about claiming fame, it was about defining success on his own terms, remaining the husband who never needed an audience to know his worth. That, he said, is success measured in hearts, not in headlines. Carl Dean's decision to speak publicly marked a profound turning point, not just for the Deans, but for every person who stands beside a star in private solidarity. In the weeks following his first interview, Carl found himself navigating uncharted territory: interviews with morning shows, invitations to podcasts about love and partnership, and requests from marriage counselors seeking his insights. Yet for all the external attention, he remained grounded in the same principles he voiced that afternoon in Nashville: privacy, partnership, and purpose. Every time his phone rang with another media query, Carl reminded himself, and his handlers, that his story was never about ego. It was about demonstrating how two people can share a life when one of them lives in the spotlight. When an NPR host asked him whether he'd consider writing a memoir, Carl paused before answering. He recognized the value of telling stories, yet he worried about diluting Dolly's voice with his own narrative. Instead, he proposed a series of guest essays for her Imagination Library newsletters. Short reflections on their decades together, each one centered on a principle like listening as love or stillness as strength. These essays allowed him to contribute meaningfully without upending the quiet equilibrium he and Dolly had cultivated. Readers responded with thousands of emails, many recounting how they applied Carl's simple lessons in their own marriages. Proof that his influence extended far beyond the gas station or the backstage lounges he once called home. Charitable organizations quickly discovered how effective Carl could be as an ambassador for causes he and Dolly supported. The Smile Zone Foundation, which funds pediatric dental clinics in underserved areas, invited him to deliver keynote remarks at its annual gala. Carl declined the spotlighted stage, suggesting instead a moderated fireside chat where he could speak more intimately about the importance of health access for children. That format resonated deeply. Donors gifted record sums, volunteers signed up in droves, and local communities felt more connected to the cause because Carl's authenticity shone brighter than any theatrical keynote ever could. It reinforced his belief that quiet leadership, choosing depth over drama, often yields the most enduring impact. Of course, Carl's re-emergence into public life wasn't without its challenges. Paparazzi lingered outside his Tennessee property, life coaches posted viral reels of his every word, and online trolls speculated about hidden tensions in the marriage. Yet, Carl handled criticism with the same calm resolve he exhibited at the podium. He refused to engage in public arguments, declined to clarify rumors, and instead doubled down on actions that spoke louder than words. When a tabloid accused him of resenting Dolly's busy schedule, Carl invited the reporter to shadow a week in his life, from early mornings in the garage to evenings coaching youth softball at the local park. No headline emerged. What the reporter found was a man whose greatest ambition was to keep Dolly's world grounded, not to claim a starring role. Behind the scenes, the couple used this renewed attention to strengthen their foundation. They instituted weekly debrief dinners, where no topic was off limits: fears, dreams, even frustrations. A gentle, no cameras, rule ensured these conversations remained sacred. Friends say these dinners became Carl's favorite part of the week. A chance to speak candidly with the woman whose presence dazzled stadiums yet craved the steady anchor of his compassionate counsel. It was, in Carl's words, a reminder that marriage is more than a shared name. It's a continuous series of commitments renewed over coffee, conversation, and care. Looking forward, Carl envisions a legacy project that reflects both partners' lifelong passions: rural youth empowerment. He and Dolly are collaborating with the Tennessee Agricultural Institute to create a scholarship program for students interested in farming, environmental science, and community leadership. Carl's contribution is logistical at first, identifying candidate regions, vetting local mentors, and drafting programming outlines. But he hopes the project will evolve into a hands-on fellowship where students live and learn on a working farm, guided by professionals who value both hard work and heart work. For Carl, this initiative encapsulates his belief that true success emerges from service, a creed he has lived quietly for 50 years. In private moments, Carl credits his quiet strength to a simple spiritual practice: daily gratitude. Each morning he writes 3 things he's thankful for, often people rather than possessions, and shares them with Dolly over breakfast. Some days the list includes unexpected blessings, like a survivor from one of their charities writing to say marriage counseling saved their relationship. Other days it's as modest as the sound of rain on my workshop roof. He says this ritual keeps him rooted in perspective, reminding him that his greatest role is not to manage an empire, but to nurture a shared life. Today, as the Deans celebrate the half-century mark of their union, Carl's public emergence has done more than satisfy curiosity. It has offered a blueprint for partnership in the age of celebrity. By speaking out with humility, prioritizing action over acclaim, and safeguarding the private rituals that sustain them, Carl illustrates how love can flourish when rooted in respect and reciprocity. His journey from silent supporter to thoughtful spokesperson underscores a timeless truth that the strongest marriages are built not on shared headlines, but on shared hearts and hands, working together side by side. Across the country, Carl's decision to speak out became more than a news story. It blossomed into a celebration of partnership that communities embraced in vibrant and deeply personal ways. In small towns and big cities alike, organizers launched Dean Days, inviting couples to renew their vows, exchange handwritten letters, and participate in workshops inspired by themes Carl had articulated: mutual respect, steady encouragement, and the power of quiet support. At community centers, local leaders screened clips of Carl's interview, pausing at key moments to invite attendees to reflect on how they might apply his simple wisdom. Love needs a witness, not a show. In their own lives, homemade banners reading "Celebrate the Unsung Hero" fluttered outside town halls, and DIY photo booths offered props like vintage gas station signs and toy microphones, nodding to Carl's roots and his first public address. In Columbus, Ohio, a nonprofit launched a marriage retreat modeled on Carl and Dolly's weekend rituals. Couples gathered in rustic cabins, practiced listening exercises over morning coffee, and hiked wooded trails in silence to mirror the couple's quiet walks through Dollywood's gardens. Local pastors and counselors facilitated roundtable discussions around Carl's principles, and each retreat ended with a candlelit promise circle, where partners pledged to nurture their relationship through actions unseen by the world. Participants spoke of newfound clarity, recognizing that a simple gesture, a hand on a shoulder, and unhurried conversation could strengthen bonds as profoundly as grand declarations. Meanwhile, Dolly and Carl announced Behind the Spotlight, an interactive exhibit set to debut at the Country Music Hall of Fame. Curators assembled photographs tracing their earliest days together. A sepia-toned snapshot of Carl's old delivery truck parked outside a cafe, where Dolly sang, a Polaroid of their wedding car, its fender gently dented from a late-night joyride. Display cases held Carl's well-worn workshop apron alongside Dolly's sequined stage jacket, symbolizing the dynamic interplay of their worlds. Visitors could leaf through facsimile letters Carl had handwritten to Dolly early in their courtship. Simple notes like, "Thank you for the songs you share in the dark," and examine a model of the Hermitage Hotel lobby where they first met. In an immersive audio room, a looped soundtrack blended Carl's soft voice with Dolly's lyrics, underscoring their lifelong duet. Beyond museums and retreats, Carl and Dolly leveraged their stories to champion causes close to their hearts. They co-founded the Dean Family Foundation, dedicated to rural youth development, literacy, and mental health. In Tennessee and Georgia, grants funded after-school programs where young people learned both mechanical trades and artistic expression. Farm equipment workshops and songwriting sessions unfolded side by side, echoing Carl's belief in balancing practical skills with creative passion. Students logged volunteer hours restoring vintage tractors, then composed poems about their experiences, nurturing a holistic sense of self that Carl insisted was rooted in purpose, not performance. In Nashville, a Quiet Partner Awards gala honored individuals who, like Carl, worked tirelessly behind the scenes. Community leaders, nonprofit volunteers, and unsung heroes of various fields received bronze statuettes inscribed with Carl's signature phrase, "Support that shines brightest stays out of sight." The gala featured guest speakers recounting stories of spouses caring for ill partners, teachers mentoring struggling students, and neighbors quietly organizing relief efforts after natural disasters. Dolly herself presented awards, acknowledging that she owed much of her own success to the steadfast love she found at home. On social media, the hashtag #FadeDianLegacy spread across platforms as people shared snapshots of their own simplest love moments. One user posted a photo of her husband fixing a leaky faucet at midnight. Another shared a clip of a friend silently showing up with groceries during a difficult time. Influencers, some with millions of followers, joined the movement, pledging to spotlight generosity without seeking fame. Even brands got involved. A coffee roastery launched a limited edition Morning with Carl blend, donating proceeds to marriage counseling nonprofits. Back at their Tennessee home, Carl and Dolly reflected on how a single decision to speak out had grown into a tapestry of community love. They hosted monthly gatherings in their garden, welcoming neighbors and supporters to share homemade pies, swap stories, and practice Carl's favorite ritual, listing 3 things they were grateful for that week. Under twinkling strings of lights, laughter blended with heartfelt confessions, reinforcing the couple's belief that authenticity and presence create stronger bonds than any spotlight ever could. As plans for future Dean Days and the museum exhibits tour took shape, the Deans remained focused on preserving the intimacy of their message. Carl emphasized that while public events could spark awareness, the true work happened in private kitchens, living rooms, and garages, where partners listened, encouraged, and renewed vows in small, everyday moments. Each morning, he and Dolly continued their own ritual of coffee and gratitude, living proof that the most enduring legacies are built not on headlines, but on humble acts of love faithfully repeated over time. In the wake of, behind the spotlight, and the inaugural Dean Days celebrations, Carl and Dolly sensed that their story had tapped into a deep yearning for genuine connection. Invitations arrived from faith communities, educational institutions, and civic organizations around the globe, each eager to host a Dean-inspired event. Yet the Deans remained discerning, declining anything that felt like a celebrity showcase. Instead, they adopted a guiding principle for future engagements: serve where we can stand alongside, not above. This ethos led them to accept a modest invitation in rural Ireland, where a cluster of small towns rallied to transform a decommissioned church into a community center. Carl traveled ahead to consult on the project's layout, allocating space for children's reading nooks, a mechanical workshop, and a performance corner. When Dolly arrived for the ribbon cutting, she stepped into a room that felt more like home than any grand auditorium. They spent the afternoon sitting on folding chairs among villagers who shared stories of economic hardship, creative revival, and the simple magic of dancing lights strung overhead. In that space, Carl mused, "This is where our legacy lives, at ground level, in ordinary hearts." Back in Tennessee, the Dean Family Foundation continued its rural youth initiative, expanding scholarships and launching mobile mentoring units that brought career training directly to under-resourced counties. Carl personally evaluated the routes for these mobile units, mapping out logistical challenges and scouting local volunteer partners. He and Dolly hosted virtual town halls where students shared project proposals, blueprints for sustainable farms, public art installations, and community radio stations. Carl found himself marveling at the children's ingenuity, recalling his own early days tinkering in the garage. "When you give them tools and trust," he told Dolly one evening, "they build worlds we could never imagine." Simultaneously, Carl and Dolly oversaw the production of a documentary series titled Quiet Strength, profiling ordinary individuals whose steadfast support created extraordinary outcomes. A teacher who delivered meals to isolated seniors, a sibling who organized accessible housing for a disabled brother, a first responder who counseled traumatized neighbors long after emergency sirens faded. Each hour-long episode wove together interviews, home video footage, and scenes of small acts of kindness, underscored by Carl's reflective narration. The series aired on public television and streaming platforms, earning acclaim for its unsentimental portrayal of service. Viewers responded with both tears and resolve, flooding community centers with pledges to replicate the models they'd seen on screen. For Carl, the series fulfilled a dual purpose, celebrating the unsung heroes while reinforcing his belief that impact is measured in hearts touched rather than headlines made. Throughout these ventures, Carl carved out space for his own creative impulses. He returned to the workshop to build a prototype of an affordable gardening cart, lightweight, foldable, and designed for seniors and people with disabilities. Between travel and board meetings, he sketched engineering diagrams and field-tested early models with neighbors in Tennessee. Dolly often dropped by to plant seeds in adjacent raised beds, laughing as Carl steered his cart along uneven pathways. This hands-on invention embodied Carl's conviction that innovation need not be glamorous to be life-changing. When the carts entered limited production, sold through the Dean Family Foundation's social enterprise arm, Orders poured in from retirement communities and rehabilitation centers. Recipients posted photos of their new tools on social media, tagging 50 cart and sharing stories of regained mobility and independence. Meanwhile, the deans were approached about turning their journey into a feature-length film. A respected director proposed a screenplay that would dramatize their early years alongside the whirlwind of Dolly's rise to fame and Carl's unseen sacrifices. The offer tempted many couples in Hollywood, but Carl and Dolly respectfully declined. They worried that condensing 5 decades into 2 hours risked trivializing the nuanced rhythms of their partnership. Instead, they agreed to consult on a live theater adaptation set to debut in Dollywood's Performance Hall. The production would use minimal staging, relying on dialogue, projected photographs, and recorded interviews to recreate key moments: their cafe courtship, the tornado's aftermath, and the garden dinners under string lights. In Carl's view, theater invites presence in a way a film cannot. It keeps the story alive between actor and audience, each performance a unique communion. As they considered the final season of their public journey, Carl and Dolly turned inward once more, anchoring their decisions in the daily rituals that had sustained them from the start. Each morning, before even drawing their curtains, Dolly read a devotional she'd written during their courtship. Carl, seated nearby with his gratitude journal, listened and offered his own reflections. They discussed letters they would send that day, notes of encouragement to a teenager in Ireland using a Dean cart, a message to a teacher in Kansas running a community center, a reply to a child in Sevier County who wanted to meet the man who built the portable cart that changed her grandmother's life. Every correspondence reinforced their conviction that impact is relational, built one note, one tool, one shared meal at a time. In private, Carl sometimes marveled at how a single act, choosing to speak out, had spun into a global tapestry of hope, service, and genuine connection. Yet he never lost sight of the vow he made on their wedding day to keep their marriage oars, not the world's dots. Even amid expanding legacies and ever-widening circles of influence, he and Dolly reserved their most sacred moments for themselves: unscripted laughter in the kitchen, rainy afternoons repairing the barn roof together, nighttime stargazing in rocking chairs. These were the threads that stitched together the grand events, the philanthropic ventures, and the public tributes. Reminders that behind every headline stands a private story of love renewed in the simple space between two hearts. As the first light of their 50th anniversary dawned, Carl and Dolly exchanged a quiet look that spoke volumes more than any microphone ever could. Their journey from a young delivery driver and an aspiring singer to global icons had been punctuated by soaring melodies and silent sacrifices, by standing ovations and hushed vows beneath the Tennessee night sky. Yet here, in the gentle glow of dawn, they were simply two hearts beating in unison, fortified by a lifetime of trust. This enduring partnership is not a static trophy on a mantle, but a living testament to the power of invisible bonds and shared dreams. Looking ahead, priority remains the same as it was 5 decades ago: to serve as conduits of hope without demanding credit. Plans for the Dean Family Foundation's next chapter include a global, Quiet Strength Fellowship, where young leaders will receive mentorship in sustainable service. These fellows will travel in small cohorts to community hubs, first in Appalachia, across Latin America and Southeast Asia, tasked with designing localized projects that balance economic uplift with cultural preservation. Carl will oversee logistical frameworks, ensuring each initiative is practical and respectful of local traditions, while Dolly contributes artistic vision and spiritual encouragement. The fellowship embodies the couple's shared conviction that genuine impact thrives in collaboration, not in solo spotlights. Meanwhile, in the creative realm, Carl has accepted an invitation to teach a rural innovation workshop at a Midwestern university. Rather than stand at a podium, he plans hands-on lessons in his beloved barn workshop, challenging students to redesign everyday tools for accessibility and ease. Dolly will join for open mic sessions, encouraging musicians and storytellers to explore empathy-infused artistry. Their joint appearances fuse grit and grace, offering participants a rare glimpse into a partnership that values both practicality and passion. Back home, their daily rituals remain sacred. Even as the world clamors for their attention, the Deans cherish unhurried breakfasts on the front porch, where Carl's gratitude journal and Dolly's lyric sketches mingle over steaming coffee. They pause midday for walks among the garden plots they planted years ago, a living archive of seasons nurtured together. And each evening, they retreat to their oak rocking chairs under the arbor of wisteria vines, exchanging verses of scripture and song. These rhythms are the bedrock of their resilience, a reminder that public purpose flourishes only when private life remains vibrant and sacred. For those inspired by Carl and Dolly's example, the invitation is simple yet profound. Honor your partnerships with unwavering presence. Celebrate each unscripted moment, and remember that the deepest legacies are cultivated in shared silences as much as in grand gestures. Their story also offers a cautionary note for those who chase visibility at any cost. In a culture that equates relevance with airtime and always on triumphs, Carl and Dolly remind us that true significance can be nurtured in the spaces between headlines. Choosing discretion over drama and depth over spectacle, they have built a legacy that outlasts fleeting applause. Their journey proves that when one voice sings loud, another can anchor the song, creating a harmony far richer than solo performances ever can. Ultimately, the final word belongs to them alone. In private moments, Carl still whispers the vow he made in that little chapel so many years ago: ours, not the world's. Dolly smiles and squeezes his hand, knowing that every melody they've woven belongs to both of them, the light that dazzles the stage, and the steadfast shadow that holds it aloft. As they face the sunrise together, their life's work continues, not as a finished ode, but as a living chorus ever unfolding. And in that shared breath, in that quiet commitment, lies the enduring secret of their remarkable union. Beyond the public eye, we are invited into Carl and Dolly's inner world, a realm where faith and action converge, where unspoken vows carry the weight of 1,000 promises. In this whispered covenant, we discover that resilience is built not only on glorious crescendos, but on quiet interludes of compassion, a steady hand on a weary shoulder, a patient smile when doubts arise, a shared silence that speaks. By embracing their example, we learn that true partnership honors both voices, one that lifts the song skyward and one that anchors its roots deep in solid ground. Let us breathe this legacy into our own relationships, inviting rest, renewal, and service into each unfolding day. And as the Deans themselves remind us, the most beautiful songs are those sung not for the applause of many, but for the comfort of one another's hearts. In this way, we carry quiet strength forward, one moment, a silent vow at a time.